Welcome to the Solid Verbal. The Solid Verbal.
Come after me! I'm a man! I'm 40!
I've heard so many players say, well, I want to be happy. You want to be happy for a day? Eat a steak.
It's that woo-woo!
And now, Dan and Ty.
Welcome back to the Solid Verbal, boys and girls. My name is Ty Hildenbrand. Joining me, as always, over there in New York City, my man, Dan Rubenstein. Sir, big win yesterday, huh?
Yeah, Ty, life is good. Life is good. My week 7 did not involve me fading or disappointing teammates or a fan base or fading away. So, listen, Ty, I can't complain. How you doing?
I'm doing well. So we're recording this show a little bit later than usual because Smile-A-Don Saturday was not limited to just Saturday. It also extended into Sunday morning as we tried to record our show and had some technical woes. We are recording this late night. This is about as late night as it gets here on the Verbal, as you and I are old men and about to fall asleep. But before we did that, we did need to do some very important recapping for, again, Smile-A-Don Saturday, which we discussed on the 18 different attempts we made this morning, how maybe Smile-A-Don does not fully capture what ended up taking place.
No, there were various moments during yesterday's action where I thought to myself, should have been a sign. What Auburn has looked like, maybe at times what Notre Dame has looked like, perhaps what Washington has looked like, perhaps what Texas has looked like, or Penn State. Should have been a sign Saturday is where I landed on what it felt like in the present tense.
Should have seen the signs, man. Yeah, well, it was quite a weekend. 4 of the top 8 go down. All told, 8 of the top 25 go down. One of those weeks, we kind of saw it coming. We saw the writing on the wall. Maybe we should have seen the signs. Let's get into your Week 7 reverbs and go from there. Have a listen.
This is Philip from Panama City, Florida, and all I've got to say is thank God for college football.
Dan, Ty, this is Connor in Baton Rouge.
Hey, this is Sean from Boiling Springs, North Carolina.
Hi, it's Charles in Columbus.
Hi, this is Andrea from Bucks County.
Hey, this is Michael from a bathroom in Portland, Oregon.
And I just want to say, welcome to Smile-A-Don Saturday. Rah, 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 rah.
We are halfway through the day, and Smile-A-Don Saturday has already claimed the victim, the Auburn Tigers, totally eaten out their insides.
Just got done watching the Auburn game. That was bad. Just had a glass of scotch to try and turn all my bad feelings into good feelings.
I just went to a wedding, and they did the bouquet toss, and it was intercepted, and I had PTSD from Jared Stidham's 2 picks against Tennessee.
Oh, ho, ho, Mr. Coach, how about them Tigers, baby?
Nobody gave us a chance, baby. Nobody gave us a chance. How about the real Tigers, the Bayou Bengals? Roar!
Got a call back from last week and state that the Georgia Bulldogs do not want Bama currently.
Rocky Top, you'll always be home sweet home to me. Bring the 11-game streak, Rocky Top, Tennessee.
Is Kentucky secretly good? Smell no.
So I was talking with my friends today, and we just discovered that Ames might be the Bermuda Triangle of college football.
How about that home dog of the week? Just walked out of Jack Troy Stadium about to party like a rock star tonight.
I think Dana Holgerson visibly lost hair during this game.
Texas may have won ugly, but they won. And now they're sitting atop the Big 12 with a bye week coming up to get healthy.
Texas is playing up or down to its competition.
Great, Notre Dame. Great. Make us sweat it out all the time with these teams that you should be beating with no problem.
Well, it's that time of year again. That time when the Big Ten eats itself.
There needs to be like a Dateline investigation into how Wisconsin won 13 games last season with Alex Hornibrook as its starting quarterback.
I don't know what this feeling is. I've never felt it before. They say that it's one of those quality wins over ranked opponents after Michigan just destroyed Wisconsin in the Big House.
Purdue fans would like to thank you for letting us use the crockpot against Illinois. Go Boilers.
I just watched Rutgers quarterbacks go 2 for 17 for 8 yards and 5 picks. I love this sport.
Hey, I just wanted to circle back on Nate Stanley really quick. 6 touchdowns. There's 4 minutes left. I bet he can fit in 2 more. Just bodying up this Hoosier defense.
Could James Franklin even sell a used car in the fourth quarter?
Hey, Dan, is Oregon back?
And it was so great to see Jake Browning sulking on the sideline after the game. The rivalry now belongs to Oregon, as it should be.
John Elway's happy. I'm happy. Let's go, Ducks!
UCLA may now be the most dangerous 1-5 team in the nation.
Arizona, you know this is Pac-12 after dark. You don't have to lie down and play dead.
The cardiac cattle just barely squeaked by previously 1-4 Tulsa. And I'm waiting until USF is your luck runs out team of the week.
North Texas, 6-1, bowl eligible for a 3rd straight year. Smell it up, Mean Green fans.
We're live from Baton Rouge. Just wanted to reiterate that Death Valley is truly the place where dreams go to die. And go Tigers. And God bless America.
God bless America indeed, Dan. 408 verbal 1-408-837-2251. Kudos to our friend, to our trusted deputy Taylor, who actually cut up this week's reverbs from a hotel room somewhere near Tuscaloosa, Alabama. He was at Bryant-Denny Stadium for the Mizzou game, had nothing but kind words about the hospitality and something called liquor lockers, which I was not familiar with previously, but seems like it'd be a good time.
I hope he got some nanner pudding. That's what you have to do when you're in Alabama. You gotta get that banana pudding. Yeah, banana pudding. Little Nilla wafer on top, Ty. You got to get in on that.
You know what I enjoyed the most about the reverbs this week, if I could?
What's that?
The sheer number of people who tried to do the Smilodon roar.
It's tough, Ty, to convey that over the bandwidth of a phone. It's not the proper venue. You know what I love, Ty? I loved the scripting out.
Yeah.
The Rocky Top, the alternate version.
The song got me.
It's wonderful. And I also like the fact that this is just in general, that our reverb line is, the turkey line that you can call on Thanksgiving to get quick last minute tips to save. And maybe sometimes people just call the turkey line and be like, am I doing okay? Is everything all right? That is what we are to that poor USF fan who's just waiting for his team to lose. That's what we are to, somebody being excited about Purdue, which you should be. But I like that no matter how you prepare your college football team, we're here to help.
Hell, I almost called it during that Notre Dame game. I'm not going to lie.
What did I said something.
Support.
We'll talk about Notre Dame eventually. It's hard to lead with Notre Dame, but I compared Pitt to like an elderly python.
Yeah.
Like Pitt just wants to be left alone and be not that great at football. And then you come around with your hopes and dreams, disturbing the elderly python that is Pitt. And Pitt's they got an attack every once in a while.
Pitt's going to snap. They still got a little bit of lead in the pencil. Yeah.
They want to squeeze you as long as they can. Sure.
All right. Well, let's start actually in the SEC, because the number 2 team in the country, the Georgia Bulldogs, lost by 20 points on the road in Death Valley to LSU. I did not see this one coming. We talked on the Wednesday preview show, and my line, if I remember correctly, because I'm an old man and I don't remember so well, especially not this late at night.
Yep.
I didn't see more than 17 points for LSU here. And it wasn't so much because I'm trying to demean the Tigers, but look, Georgia's had a pretty good defense over the last couple years. Maybe they were missing a few parts and they're still trying to figure that out halfway through the year, but still a pretty good defense. The Georgia offense was averaging near 43 points per game. There were questions about the LSU offense, like a whole bunch of different things coming together at the same time. I didn't see more than 17 points. Lo and behold, here we sit on Sunday night talking about LSU 36, Georgia 16, Dan. To me, I felt a little bit blindsided by this one.
Are you a believer now in LSU? Are you a Jarrett believer? I really tried with that tie. I swear to you I did. No, Are you an LSU after at home looking like they did, making Georgia look like it did? Are you ready to turn that page on LSU?
I think you have to be.
Yeah.
I think you have to be. I think if at this
We're
point...
6 games in, right?
Yeah. At this point, if you are unwilling to admit that LSU is a top 10 team, at worst a top 12 team in the country, you've got an axe to grind with LSU. Here's the deal. 3 top 10 wins. They've got a game left against Mississippi State. Well, okay, sure. We can qualify
at the time, yes.
At the time, 3 top 10 wins, not bad.
Okay.
Not bad. I'll take that given where I thought LSU might be this season.
Sure.
Mississippi State next week. Potentially a letdown. Who knows?
The trappiest trap that ever trapped. Yeah.
Yeah. Mississippi. I can't even say it. Mississippi State's a pretty good team.
Mm-hmm.
They've also got Alabama the first week of November, which is shaping up to be another Smile It On Saturday, by the way.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And then they close out the year with A&M. So there's more work to be done for LSU. But I think by beating Georgia, if that's not testament enough to them being for real, then I don't know what is.
Yeah, and that's beating down Georgia, not just sneaking by 17-14. So the big takeaways for me looking at this game were basically LSU's offense, while not some kind of war machine monster like others with their talent level, they make plays. And one week it's Nick Brissett, the next week it's Clyde Edwards-Helaire, whatever. Jefferson's making plays on the outside. Joe Burrow, while he's not the most accurate, he seems to be timely. He is a dual threat more often than I think people want to admit. And, Coach O going for it in a huge spot to keep momentum going. And watching that game, it was obvious to me that LSU had something that you see from very good teams, and that is the offense and defense, and really special teams working in concert. That the offense was taking advantage when the defense was forcing turnovers, when they had a short field. The defense was taking advantage of the offense, giving them time and taking chances, knowing that the offense was going to be able to score, and the defense playing with a knowledge of Jake Fromm is off.
Yeah.
And part of that is us, and part of that is maybe some predictable play calling. Part of that is Jake Fromm just seeing ghosts, whatever it is. I'm not worried about Georgia long term. Georgia's going to be fine. Going to LSU and beating a good LSU team is like something that 123 teams every year are just not going to be able to do. But Georgia looked off. They just they look like they did last year at Auburn. And I don't know if that's just going to be a once a year thing. And if it is, there are worse plights in college football. But I think the majority of this is LSU being just so dangerous, particularly at home.
For sure. So again, 36-16 your final. LSU knocks off the number 2 ranked Georgia Bulldogs. Georgia, by the way, is on bye next week. They've got Florida in 2 weeks. That'll be an interesting contest for us to preview. Let's move on. Let's go to number 6, West Virginia, on the road at Iowa State. The final here, Iowa State 30, West Virginia 14. Just like a masterclass here for Matt Campbell in coaching, in game planning. The two things that jumped out to me. If you didn't watch this game, if you're trying to figure out what the heck happened, go to the box score and first look at Will Greer's stat line throwing the football. West Virginia's a throwing football team. They're a thrower, maybe not so much a grower, but they're a thrower for sure.
I think that's fair. Yeah.
Will Greer goes 11 for 15 for 100 yards. When you see 15 attempts, you think, oh, well, maybe he got hurt. Maybe there was what happened? Well, there are no backup stats.
Maybe they were running for 14 yards an attempt.
Maybe they were running the Navy offense. Who the hell knows? But 15 attempts seems off for Will Greer. But then you see there was no backup. And then you dig in a little bit more and you find point 2. Oh, Iowa State held the ball for 37 and a half minutes. Oh, they held West Virginia to just 1 of 10 on third down conversions. That's how they got the job done. That's how they controlled the flow of this game, how they controlled the narrative of this game. Honestly, if you watched it, it never felt like Iowa State was in any danger of losing this football game. They had control from the jump, and I thought, at least from what I've seen of the Cyclones, this was far and away their best game of the year. It does seem like they're getting better now.
Yes, and quick disclaimer, Ty, my voice, a little bit different, probably.
A little bit different. Are you in a closet now? Where are you?
It's actually probably a better option than we ever would have had for the first 8 to 9 years of this show. I I'm standing right where I was, but my microphone keeps blipping and crackling, and we owe it to the consumer we owe it to Iowa State, really, Ty, to do better.
Oh my God, yeah.
Yes, I will agree without spending too much time on our dumb audio issues that it was the best game Iowa State played all year. They were in control. They got stronger. They now have, at least for the time being, pretty much the best combination of things that you could hope for as an up-and-coming college football program, which is a coach you believe in and a true freshman quarterback you believe in, out of nowhere, mind you. But incredibly impressive. The defense was great, shutting out West Virginia in the second half. I don't think West Virginia is bad. I know there's frustration among Ears fans, but when somebody invites you to play football in Iowa State, and in Ames, Iowa, excuse me, like we tweeted out, just politely say no. Just say, "Oh no,
don't do it."
I'm washing my hair that night.
Well, that three-headed monster of Brock Purdy, David Montgomery, and Hakeem Butler was just ridiculous in this game. Montgomery, in particular, looked electric. 189 yards, ran angry, showed really good moves. And Brock Purdy, who we've talked about now for 2 weeks running, beat Oklahoma State a week ago, knocked off West Virginia at home on Saturday, still has a shot at Texas Tech in 2 weeks. They go on the road at Texas later, I guess in November. He will presumably be the starting quarterback until further notice because he has looked so good. Iowa State right now, as you look at the landscape, probably sets up as an 8-4 or a 9-3 team, which is just remarkable for Matt Campbell to be doing this.
Yeah, the schedule actually, yes, depending on what happens with Sam Ehlinger's shoulder, and we'll get to that, but they don't play them until mid-November. But the Big 12, the back half of the Big 12, and I know they finish with a very small school, a non-conference game, but yeah, what a nice, unexpected sort of mid-season shift for Iowa State.
Let's go to Oregon, 30. Number 7, Washington, 27. This one went to overtime. Another home game for Oregon. Another big home game for Oregon.
Yeah.
That goes to overtime. This time, as opposed to the Stanford game earlier in the year, a much different result. What a huge win for the Ducks here. Washington's Peyton Henry had a chance to win it.
Yes.
He hooks a 37-yard field goal at the gun. Then in the first possession of overtime, the Huskies settle for a field goal, which turns the ball over to Oregon, gives them their crack at it. It opens a door for the Ducks, who promptly won on a 6-yard touchdown run from C.J. Verdell. Again, your final here, 30-27. I didn't watch this game as closely as I wanted because I was worried about my own nail biter over on NBC.
Sure.
But talk to me about what went on here because I was jumping back and forth. What was the lay of the land up there in Eugene for this game?
The lay of the land is a lot of people being very happy after being very nervous and sad at the end of the game with Peyton Henry lining up and Mario Cristobal icing him a couple times. It's a different Oregon team to watch. It's a very much body blow-ish Oregon team to watch. I just saw a stat that I don't think anybody who's played Oregon has won a game since playing Oregon.
Wow.
So they're your early, Stanford hasn't, correct? They lose to Utah and Notre Dame. Some of the small schools haven't. Cal loses to UCLA, which not a terrific feather in their hat, but as it relates to Oregon, Justin Herbert, kind of an off day, made a couple of big plays. Jake Browning was definitely the better quarterback on the field, had more time, made plays. We saw that long touchdown pass, but I thought Oregon's defense did a good job against Washington's offense in general. And it is definitely strange watching an Oregon offense that is happy to take 4 point whatever yards a carry. I don't know what they finished at. It might have been less than that, but they were happy to march down the field and be patient. I didn't think their final drive in regulation was all that good. So maybe that's where things sort of shifted away from what I'm used to. But enormous win for Oregon. Great play call at the end as they saw Washington in like a nickel or dime package and to just go straight at the heart of that defense. And it's something that is going to energize Oregon on the field, on the recruiting trail, and they now face a crazy trap going to Washington State, who had a bye last week, and I like the Cougs.
Yeah, well, game day's coming to town for the first time in
that's true. All Crimson.
Yeah, so it's going to be quite a scene up there in Pullman, but nonetheless, a big win for Oregon. Oregon jumps all the way up to number 12 now in the newest AP poll. We can't usually do that on the show because usually we record at 9:30 in the morning, but being so it's 9:30 at night, Yeah, a little bit of a different case here. Big win for Oregon again in OT. They go on to victory, 30-27. Let's go to State College. Michigan State 21, Penn State 17. I don't care if you were rooting for Michigan State, if you were rooting for Penn State, or if you were just channel surfing at some point in the afternoon.
Right.
Whatever your situation, this was a painful game to watch. If you didn't have to watch this game, you probably shouldn't have. Penn State, for the second straight season, is handed a very close loss by Michigan State. Now, the Spartans have been an interesting case. We talked about them on the preview show. They've been underwhelming this season. They brought back 19 starters from a year ago, and they just haven't really been able to run the ball. The defense at times has been a little shakier than we expected, though, albeit still very, very good. Mm-hmm. I don't know if Brian Lewerke has quite been up to par here in the early going, but Michigan State controlled this game. They had about 10 more minutes of possession, and down the stretch, it seemed like it had a real outsized impact on that Penn State defense because they did start to look tired. But here is the main takeaway for me. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying this to disrespect Michigan State because Michigan State clearly has Penn State's number.
Disrespect.
Penn State in their last 29 games is 24-5. Mm-hmm. Those 5 losses are by a combined 12 points. This is a thing now with James Franklin. For a while, we would make fun of him for the clock management, but the real story here is fourth quarter management. And again, like we did against Ohio State, like we saw plenty of other times, a couple times last year, this time around, Penn State had another chance to close the game out. Mm-hmm. Michigan State tries to fake a field goal in the fourth quarter. It doesn't work. It was a terrible play.
Little Giants 2. That's what they call it.
Terrible play. Penn State gets the ball back. On one drive, they have 4 downs. On the next, they have 3, and they quickly punt it. They give the ball right back to Michigan State. Michigan State marches the field with 1:19 left to score the go-ahead game-winning touchdown. Penn State needs to be better in those situations if they want to truly be an elite program. This is a thing for James Franklin that he needs to overcome, and Penn State's not there yet.
No. James Franklin's sort of the old Dos Equis guy, I guess, now, where he doesn't always lose games. But when he does...
They're by 1.5 points.
Oh, boy. Yeah, are they entertaining and weird? Yeah, Michigan State, all things considered, I'm going to give them a little bit of respect because Felton Davis, real good, and pretty much the only seasoned weapon in that receiving core, one that is increasingly important when they haven't really been able to consistently run the ball. As you mentioned, and Brian Lewerke he didn't have a great game, made big throws when it counted a couple times, but yeah, I just don't know what to make of this Penn State team. And the should have been a sign thing is those first halves against Pitt, against Illinois, and the key moments against Ohio State where tackle somebody, tackle anybody. Yeah. And this Penn State team, it's a very weird thing because the expectations were pretty high given Trace McSorley coming back, but with what they lost on defense, with the gravity that was Saquon Barkley on offense, it's okay to make peace with Penn State merely being their down years being a pretty good team. And I think that's what needs to happen.
Well, I agree. And somebody needs to explain to me how Penn State looked like garbage coming off a bye week.
That's totally fair.
Somebody needs to explain that one to me. I'll do credit to Michigan State. They played a good game here. They got the job done. We figured if they'd win, it would be close. And I'm not bitter about that. I'm just very curious from the Penn State perspective why it wasn't a better effort. Nonetheless, big win for Michigan State, 21-17.
By the way,
going on the road in Happy Valley. Nice win.
By the way, just because with my drive chart readings, I don't like picking on teams that have terrible drives against Alabama or Clemson. Like, that's going to happen. That is going to happen. But Penn State in this game, and I'm using my phone as a backup recording device, so I won't be able to play Dvorak unless you magically have a Dvorak.
I don't have it on the soundboard today, no.
But Penn State going fumble, touchdown, punt, touchdown. Hey, so far so good. Punt, end of half, punt, downs, fumble, missed field goal, punt, end of game.
Oh, man.
On a really ugly, this was pop gun throw, Hail Mary. Yeah. So it was rough to watch. Luckily, that was not my main focus at that time. That was a side TV, but ugly.
Well, we're going to see what happens now to Penn State moving forward. They've got a gimme win against Rutgers for sure. But then there are a bunch of other games mixed in, all of which could be losses depending on how they play. If they come out and look flat on the road at Indiana's a team that could muster up enough to beat them.
Well,
we'll see.
Okay.
We'll see.
That's true.
There are no gimmies on that schedule outside Rutgers. So we'll see where Penn State goes. Michigan State hosts Michigan next week. And I'm actually going to go to Michigan next. I want to talk about this Saturday night game in the Big House. Michigan wins 38-13 in a game that was really never in doubt. And I would say, as opposed to the previous couple games we've been talking about where the favorite goes out and they struggle, this was a super encouraging win on about 15 different levels for Jim Harbaugh. For one, the defense remains superb. If anything, they're getting better.
Yeah, with perhaps their best player sidelined in Rashawn Gary.
Jonathan Taylor tailback, not Jonathan Taylor Thomas, full disclosure. Went over 100 yards, but he didn't kill him. And I think that's going to be the template for everyone playing Wisconsin moving forward. Let him get the yards, just don't let him kill you. And that's exactly what Michigan did. Alex Hornibrook held to 7 of 20 for 100 yards and 2 interceptions.
And brother, it was going to be about 25 until garbage time.
That's right. His QBR, according to ESPN, I'm not sure I even understand what this QBR number is. Math whizzes smarter than me and probably you have figured this out. His QBR was 0.7, which feels very low.
It does feel unacceptable, Ty. That's how I'm going to weigh in on that number. Wisconsin, their strength had been offense. We had seen them take steps back on defense, starting with that BYU game. And for Wisconsin to look, and listen, I understand with everything changing in the secondary and injuries and targeting calls, like this was not the same Badger defense we had seen these past 3, 4, 5 years. But to be Michigan and so emphatically in your own house after they beat them, 14-7 in Ann Arbor a couple years ago, to go to 38 points with Shea Patterson, the offense opening up a little bit. We saw him with a long run. We saw Dylan McCaffrey with a long run in garbage time. It was another step up for this Michigan offensive line, for Nico Collins and Donovan Peoples-Jones to get going like they did. Not huge yardage, but paced this game really well. A complete win for Michigan and an obvious crockpotting to me because it was only 13 or 14-7 at halftime. And then slowly those flavors, they melded together, Ty. They came together, they swirled in that cauldron, and Michigan finishes this one out winning by 25. So have to be encouraged if you're a Michigan fan. The back half of their schedule is with Penn State looking down. Michigan State's going to be super tough in East Lansing. They always are. Finishing in Columbus. It shapes up pretty well for a Wolverine team on the rise.
By comparison, Shea Patterson's QBR was 62.2, which is demonstrably better than 0.7.
You don't get these kind of math insights.
That's right.
On other shows. You actually, no, I take that back. There are many shows that have much better math insights.
All right. 38-13, a huge win for Michigan. They're set up very nicely. They're all the way up to number 6 in the polls now.
Yeah.
In the AP poll.
Deservedly so.
Let's go to South Bend for a hot minute if we could. Notre Dame 19, Pitt 14.
Elderly Python.
Yeah.
14.
If you look at the box score before the final score here, I think it paints a far different story. Notre Dame should have lost this game, Dan.
Correct.
They should have lost this football game. But Ian Book puts it together in the second half. You saw right out of the gates in the second half, he started to kind of find a little bit of a rhythm. They were doing some different things on offense. It seemed like the tide was turning. It took a while to get there. But eventually, with 5:43 left, Ian Book drives, connects with Miles Boykin for a 35-yard touchdown pass, which ended up being the game winner. The first time, actually, that Notre Dame led in this game was at the 5:43 mark. Not a pretty win, but on Smile It On Saturday, on Should Have Seen the Sign Saturday, a win is a win. It was all about surviving advance for Notre Dame. For really any team that won, whether it's Florida, whether it's UCF, there are a whole slew of teams that won by the hair on their chin. I will take the win. I'm not happy about how it looked, particularly in the first half.
Put on your Ace of Base hat and or unitard.
Yeah.
Did you see a sign, and did it open up your eyes when you look at this Notre Dame team where in 2-3 weeks, even though the schedule looks pretty manageable for the Irish, where you could say, yes, it was a sign that coming into a game against the 108th best rush defense, Dexter Williams basically averaged a yard a carry.
Right.
You take away that he had a long of 13. You take that away, it was 12 carries for 18 yards. If my math this time is correct. Are there offensive takeaways that even in a survive and advance scenario that should trouble Notre Dame fans?
There's an offensive and a defensive takeaway from me. And I'll start with the defense because the defense is something important here. This defense was caught on its heels initially because Pitt drove the field, opening drive, 10 minutes, scored a touchdown. And it seemed at that point, from that point forward, through most of the football game, it seemed like Pitt had control. But the Notre Dame defense only gave up that touchdown. The other 7 points came on a kick return to open up the second half for Pitt. Notre Dame played outstanding on the defensive side of the ball. Pitt missed 2 kicks. All right. This game could have gone their way very easily, but Notre Dame's defense really locked down, really found its groove after that first drive. And I think knowing that Notre Dame has that as just sort of a fallback, that they're going to stay in games because of that defense, that's a rock. That's a good thing to have, a good problem to have if you're Notre Dame. So that's my first takeaway, that the defense did not collapse.
Clark Lee, good job. First half of
He's
the
been
season.
outstanding. The offensive takeaway is that Pitt blitzed at least every play in the first half of this football game.
Great. It worked.
It really did work. And Ian Book seemed like he was a bit rattled. He was doing that thing again that he did a week ago where he was throwing over guys, streaking down the field.
Yeah.
I'm curious to see against better teams than Pitt how that shakes out for Ian Book and how that shakes out for the offensive line, because there were times where they looked overwhelmed. And whether it's in the passing game or the running game, that could be a bit problematic.
I will say this. That throw to Miles Boykin, though. Woo!
Good
Thing
throw.
of beauty.
Good throw. Notre Dame wins.
Absolutely.
Notre Dame survives 19-14 over Pitt at home. And real quick, before we get into some individual conferences, just want to mention UCF 31, Memphis 30. We talked a little bit about UCF's defense. As it goes, it showed up about 2 quarters late to this football game. Finally figured Memphis out in the second half. It held their rushing attack that was outstanding in the first half to pretty much nothing in the second half. Also shut out the Memphis Tigers in the second half here. So 31-30, it was a come-from-behind victory for UCF. We're starting to do this thing now in the polls where in the coaches poll, UCF moved up 1 to number 9, but in the AP, they froze at 10 while there were a bunch of teams that hurdled them. This is, again, going to be more narrative that we have to contend with through the second half of the season, but nonetheless, nice win for UCF on the road against Memphis.
Yeah, God forbid you move UCF up after a tough road win against a good team.
I know.
Yeah, it was quite impressive, and it was the way they did it. That it was, I think, McGowan who burst up the middle for on a 4th and short, just doing it in a number of ways. UCF is really good, and I can't imagine anybody really wants a part of them once again.
I want to go to the Big Ten here and talk about Ohio State 30, Minnesota 14. Another ho-hum day for Dwayne Haskins, 412 yards passing, 3 touchdowns through the air. He is putting up pinball numbers every week. But.
Correct.
But.
Train Haskins. Toot toot.
But. This one was 17-14 at half. Minnesota, Dan, hung around a while. They got a good game from Muhammad Ibrahim on the ground, Tyler Johnson in the receiving game. You would expect a PJ Fleck team to fight, to be motivated. I just think the bigger takeaway here is that the Ohio State defense needs a little work. It needs a little work.
Yeah.
for the high level of talent that they have on that team. It just needs a little work. Granted, they only gave up 14 points. They shut out Minnesota in the second half, but if we're truly splitting hairs here and talking about what is our takeaway from week 7 for Ohio State, that would be the thing for me, the defense.
Yeah, the other thing to me is when Ohio State's not running, you can make it a game. And it was a day where Weber and Dobbins just couldn't burst through. We're not getting separation. We're not consistently getting 6, 7, 8, 9 yards. And a lot like those Baylor teams, I guess, from 6, 7 years ago, 4 years ago, whatever. I don't remember when they were last actually fun before, everything came out. You could let them throw the ball. If you stopped them on the ground, they were beatable. And teams eventually figured that out. And I don't know that Ohio State is on that low a level because that defense is still going to be good enough. And when Nick Bosa comes back, they're going to be able to get after the quarterback to even a scarier extent. But this was 20-14 going into the fourth quarter against a Minnesota team who was just drilled by Maryland.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm worried about Ohio State, but I can't, other than I guess Michigan and Michigan State, but I still think that Ohio State is in a good enough position because of Dwayne Haskins and his just never-ending cavalry of receivers. I think it was KJ Hill yesterday who went off. It was his week.
No.
1 week it's Austin Mack, another it's Johnny Dixon's, another it's McLaurin's, whatever. And just because they can get that sort of instant offense, it's difficult to truly worry about Ohio State against anybody below a top 15 team right now.
Iowa 42, Indiana 16. To our everlasting shame, we forgot to mention this game on the Wednesday show.
We did.
And
we talked about Nate Stanley enough during the fantasy things.
Yeah, no,
it covered us for weeks like that. But yeah,
we've earned enough goodwill in the Iowa community. But I'd love to say we forgot about this one because we saw this coming, but we didn't. The line was just Iowa -3.5, something like that. An offensive explosion for the Hawkeyes. 320, 6 touchdowns through the air for Nate Stanley. The fourth straight game where Iowa has now gone over 400 yards of total offense, Dan.
This is true. Against an Indiana defense that has been decent enough. I'm not going to tell you this is a superpower defense, but at this point, is Nate Stanley right now with what he's done these past, 3 weeks, and it's not the biggest level of competition, is he the second best pure thrower thus far this season? Is he ahead of Trace McSorley? Behind Haskins. I'm diving into the numbers right now. Just against Big Ten teams, Nate Stanley is probably, he has 3 times the number of touchdown passes.
I'll still take Trace Sorley in a big game situation, but statistically speaking, you're probably right.
Nate Stanley had, if you compare the Ohio State matchups.
Okay. 42-16 your final here. Let's move on. Northwestern 34, Nebraska 31. This one went to overtime because Nebraska blew a 10-point lead in the final 5:41 of regulation. For the first time in forever, Dan, it dawned on me that Northwestern has an identity. And it's really an identity by subtraction, if such thing does exist, because Jeremy Larkin can't play, right? He got hurt.
Yeah, that's a bummer.
Huge bummer. But because of that, there's just no real rushing attack to speak of. And it's clear that when you only manage 32 yards on the ground against a defense of this Nebraska caliber, really, you can't run on anyone.
Right. Nebraska's defense is the cure for the common run.
This is correct. So now we're at a place where they're just going to let Clayton Thorson throw it 64 times. And you know what? I am fine with that. I think I want to call this the new look Northwestern offense, because I finally feel like it makes sense to me watching it or trying to project it. We just know that they're going to let him throw it a whole bunch of times. And hey, that could be kind of fun to watch. In this case, Nebraska probably should have won. They blew it down the stretch. Worst start in the history of forever. I don't know. I'm sure Nebraska fans aren't excited about being.
No, they've never started 0-6. This is the one.
It's the one.
Yeah.
I'm sure Nebraska fans aren't excited about that. I still feel very optimistic about Scott Frost. A tough one here that'll sting for a while, but I thought some positive signs here, just that they're seemingly playing a little bit better on offense with Adrian Martinez, despite the 3-point loss.
Yeah, Devin Zigbo was good on the ground. They couldn't close it. Their overtime was horrid to watch, Ty. I mean, that 4th and 1 bad snap, throwing it up and hoping for the best. It was a painful watch, the way that Nebraska lost this game. Northwestern is America's grower, I guess. Just every year they're just going to look like nuclear waste in the first month of the season, and then slowly just chip away at everybody else on their schedule. And it sucks to watch. Nebraska should have probably beaten Akron to start the season, and they had that opportunity against Colorado, and they had the chances and the lead against Northwestern. But it's not particularly good TV right now.
All right. And elsewhere in the Big Ten, very quickly, we had Maryland 34, Rutgers 7. And I say this with no disrespect to Maryland, but as one of our callers pointed out, the highlight of this game may have been Rutgers finishing with 8 total passing yards and I believe 5 interceptions.
Yeah, that's a numbers thing. And yet. So what you call him, King Arthur? We might have to downgrade
We may have to downgrade that, yeah.
2 of 16 for 8 yards and 4 picks. And yet, however the math works out, a QBR above 1.0, something that Alex Hornibrook did not get to. Well, however QBR is figured out, congratulations to Big Art Sitkowski on a QBR of 1.1.
And finally, we had Purdue 46, Illinois 7, 611 total yards for the Boilermakers here. Yeah, offensive.
Maybe another grower.
Possibly, you never know.
Purdue has to finish. I mean, they go to Michigan State in a couple weeks. They have Ohio State this coming week, I believe. Yes, Minnesota, Wisconsin. It's a tough schedule. I imagine between Ohio State, Michigan State, Wisconsin, they're winning it. They're winning one of those.
Let's go to the ACC, where UVA, the Cavaliers, the Who's, knocked off Miami 16-13. The Virginia defense came through in a big way here. N'Kosi Perry got yanked. He was only in for 4 offensive series before it was apparent he couldn't crack the code. They brought in Malik Rozier. He was a little better, but not all that much.
Nah.
I did you watch any of this game?
I did. It was on a side TV, so I was back. My eyeballs were back and forth. This game was another tough watch.
I felt like this is what football used to be before they invented touchdowns.
Yeah, there was, I mean, to lose a game to a quarterback who throws 3 picks and to play as well as Miami's defense did. Miami's defense did more than enough to win this game.
Sure.
And got nothing from this offense. I don't think Malik Rozier is Rozier. It's not Rozier, apparently.
Apparently not.
It's Malik Rozier. Rozier. He is a very average quarterback, and Perry has the higher ceiling. I understand the start was atrocious, QBR 0.1. But for Miami's offense to not be able to get 17 points against Virginia, they were a mess. They were undisciplined. The play calling was all over the place. And shout out to Virginia for winning this game. But I can't imagine that if you told Virginia players about what happened in this game, they'd be like, oh, yeah, we lost by 2.5 touchdowns. if what you're saying we perform like is true, yeah, we lost by 15, 16 points. It's like, no, you won by 3. Congrats.
Yeah.
So happy coincidence, happy surprise for the Hoos.
Virginia now 4-2, 7-5, looks very attainable for Bronco Mendenhall.
I like it.
Yeah,
cool
at
story.
A minimum, he's going back to a bowl for the 2nd straight year, which is a good sign for this program. Elsewhere in the ACC, very quickly, I'm going to run through these, Dan. Virginia Tech 22, UNC 19. Tech was on the ropes here. They couldn't really get any momentum. They were giving up big chunks on defense. But I think Tech fans are going to look at the last 6 minutes of this game for a while. That final drive by Ryan Willis was a thing of beauty. They converted 4 third downs. They had a heroic 4th and 9 where he was bounced around a bit. They ultimately end up winning this football game again, 22-19. So nice win for Tech.
Yeah.
Duke wins 28-14 over Georgia Tech. Duke quietly sitting at 5-1. They could end up being like an 8-4 team this year. If you're super optimistic, you can get all the way up to 9-3, but 8-4 feels very, very likely to me.
Yeah, they go to Clemson, and I believe they go to Miami. And listen, these are not 2 perfect teams. Miami and Clemson. I like Duke. I don't believe enthusiastically in them, but yeah, 8-4, 9-3 with this schedule, how it's shaping up.
Yeah.
You can't convince me dramatically otherwise.
And finally, Boston College 38, Louisville 20. AJ Dillon actually still out because of injury for Boston College, but it doesn't really matter because they played Louisville. Have the Jeff Brom to Louisville rumors started yet? Just asking for a friend.
I don't know what the buyout of his contract looks like. And by the way, that means Brom and I think Petrino's contract might be kind of difficult to lift and separate. So it might be another year before Louisville's able to move on, but yeah, Louisville's a nightmare. And BC, by the way, they stomped them on the ground. They killed them over and over again. And so it is amazing. And people that pay closer to attention to Louisville football surely will know better than I or you or whoever looking at this game somewhat from afar. I did not watch much of this game, but Bobby Petrino teams, they'll fall off a cliff.
Yeah.
They don't slide. It's what is it? Thelma and Louise.
It's full speed. Thelma and Louise.
Yeah. It's it sucks to see because there is still a good amount of talent on this Louisville team. I really like their receiving core. I like a couple of their backs. And I know we've both felt that Puma Pass was going to be, I mean, he's not going to be Lamar Jackson, but thought he would be put in a better position to succeed and make more plays than he has.
Let's move over to the SEC. Florida, 37. Vanderbilt, 27. Nice little front door cover here, Dan. So the Gators trailed 21-13 at half. Vandy seemed to be having a lot of success. But in the second half...
That was a happy 21-13, by the way.
It was a very happy...
It was 21-3 very quickly.
For sure. In the second half, Florida imposed its will. They outscored Vandy 24-6. It was, if nothing else, a sloppy letdown win for Florida. But again, on a weekend, that was all about surviving and advancing. What do they say? You don't have to be faster than the bear, just faster than your buddy. And that's where we stood with this Florida-Vandy game. Florida has Georgia in 2 weeks, as we said earlier. That game, I'm eager to get your thoughts on that game when the time comes. But for now, nice win for Florida.
Yeah, and I think it's time to start making peace with Florida's offense taking steps in the right direction. Felipe Frank's making plays. LaMichael Pirine is probably one of the 3, 4, 5 best running backs in the SEC.
He's good. He's real good.
There is a rhythm to Florida that we haven't really seen. Granted, yes, it's Vandy. Yes, Florida should have beaten them 45-10, but Florida hasn't been a team to come back when they've gone down big these past few years. And so I am believing that games like these can ultimately be an indicator in the sort of big picture of Florida.
Tennessee 30, Auburn 24. First things first. Congrats to Tennessee. Nice win. They went on the road. They got the W. They rallied. Yes. They broke their 11-game SEC losing streak. And so all of that taken in tandem, to me, that represents a clear sign of progress for Jeremy Pruitt and this program. Jarek Guarantano picked Auburn apart.
Oh my gosh, surgical.
He picked them apart. He didn't turn the ball over. Defensively, Tennessee forced Jared Stidham to turn it over 3 times. Tennessee came to play in this football game. So good for Big Orange. That being said, we may be at a point where Auburn could come off the tracks pretty quickly here, Dan.
Yeah. This is a Tennessee team that Auburn should beat.
Yes.
At home with a healthy Jarrett Stidham. I understand the offensive line issues. I understand the running game issues. I understand the injuries in the receiving core. But this is an Auburn team that should be beating a Tennessee team at home. I don't know what's happened to this offense. I watched a chunk of this game. Tennessee there was more fight to Tennessee. There was more spirit to Tennessee on both sides of the ball. And it's a positive way when I say it should have been a sign. It should have been a sign seeing how Tennessee played even in losses. The Florida game was ugly and the crazy amount of turnovers, but the way they did play against Georgia, the way that they have fought, the way that they have looked like they've had more belief than they have in the recent years under Butch Davis. I am I'm not buying low, but I am encouraged right now by Tennessee.
Next week, Auburn is on the road at Ole Miss. They're only a 3.5-point favorite. Then they're on bye before a game against A&M. They also play on the road at Georgia, on the road at Bama in November.
Yes.
It ain't getting any easier for the Tigers.
No.
We'll see which direction they head now moving forward. Also in the SEC, A&M knocks off South Carolina on the road 26-23. A&M held the ball for 41 minutes and 29 seconds in this football game, Dan.
They did. And the offensive line isn't great right now for A&M, but it's okay. They've already played Alabama. I was impressed with Kellen Mond in this game. I figured Travion Williams would do more against the South Carolina front, but still impressive, all things considered, in a potential letdown spot after the overtime win against Kentucky. Did you see, I think it's Jace Sternberger, the big tight end for A&M, just dragging the South Carolina safety?
Amazing.
Have you ever dragged anything for 30 yards, let alone a human? Wow. So yes, I think Kendrick Rogers is still hurt, is out with a bum foot. So impressive for A&M to have the slack picked up by a couple other guys. A good survive in advance. You used that term earlier for Texas A&M with moments that weren't great, especially for that defense. Another, if you can believe it, another targeting call for Donovan Wilson. But A&M, you can see the pieces coming together.
You mentioned Alabama. Alabama wins by a 39-10 score. The story coming out of this game was Tua Tagovailoa re-aggravating his knee. He had a knee sprain. He re-aggravated it. Doesn't seem like it's anything serious, but that will be the main thing to watch now as we progress forward through the rest of Alabama's season. Otherwise, Alabama just ho-hum picked off Drew Lock's very first pass of the game and sort of set the tone. A 29-point win. Not really that much to add, Dan. They looked impressive as ever.
I liked all of Mizzou's touchdown drive, not drives. I liked their early drive. They scripted together a nice few plays to score. The Tua thing is not terribly concerning right now. I hope everything is all right. I don't know which knee it is. I think he was wearing a brace in the first half and then that came off. And you had tweeted out at a certain point, Ty, that when will the earth finally rid itself of every medical and legal TV show idea?
Yeah.
You know what they haven't done?
Sports trainers.
This fall.
Oh, no.
ABC. The medical tent. Medicine in a 10 by 10 square foot space. Tua's mom came in.
I saw that.
It was a whole thing. We hope he recovers quickly. They're not the same team with Jalen Hurts at quarterback, but they might be good enough.
Probably still good enough.
They might still be good enough.
All right. They win by 29. And to close out the SEC, Ole Miss 37, Arkansas 33. Big game for Jordan Ta'amu, who had over 520 yards of total offense. Let me move on, Dan. Let's go to the Pac-12 quick here and talk about USC 31, Colorado 20. USC is now 13-0 versus Colorado all time. They've quietly got a 19-game home winning streak. It's somehow gotten lost in the shuffle, but a nice win for USC here. I thought a good showing for the Trojan defense. They held Colorado down. They had 4 sacks, 16 tackles for loss.
16!
Yeah.
Let's not gloss over that number. This is a young defense. They were without Cam Smith, their 17-year starting middle linebacker. Porter Gustin was beat up. The secondary does not look anything like we thought it would look like, January and February. And they get after a really feisty Colorado offense.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So
nice game.
Not a great game for JT Daniels. Couple picks. I think the first throw of the game was a pick and was bailed out by Michael Pittman's probably one of the quieter, really good receivers in the country. He bails him out on a really badly underthrown ball for a long touchdown. But you beat an undefeated Colorado team at home. Hopefully for USC in a conference that badly needs competitive teams, this is a sign of things to come for the Trojans.
USC also needs to clean up the penalties. They are currently dead last in FBS, averaging 11.5 penalties per game. They had 13 in this one. Laviska Shenault, by the way, we can't go a show without talking about him. We might get to him with dude alerts, but 9 catches, 72 yards, 2 carries, 46 yards, and a touchdown. He accounted for 44.5% of Colorado's offense in this football game.
In a down game for Laviska Shenault, he had 11 touches for 120-ish yards and a touchdown.
Utah 42, Arizona 10. Khalil Tate left the game after 2 drives with an ankle injury. Really, though, Utah finding a way to get the job done on offense. This is quietly a story out west that we need to pay a little bit more attention to. Tyler Huntley, over his last 2 games, has completed almost 78% of his passes for 400 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 1 interception, averaging about 10 yards per attempt. Utah looked good a week ago on offense, looked good, really good against Arizona. Granted, not a top-level defense, but on their first 7 drives, they had 5 touchdowns, 1 turnover on downs, and then 1 that just sort of ended the half. You combine that with a very good defense that sacked Arizona 5 times. Arizona never really had a chance here.
No. Tyler Huntley throwing touchdown, rushing touchdown, and I believe receiving touchdown. No. Correct? No. Utah, a definite grower. Their offense looked woeful after the first 2 or 3 weeks, and it's hard to stay too hung up on Arizona because they're just bad. They're just a bad college football team this year. And, Khalil Tate hasn't been the same. He's been beat up. He finally leaves this game. But Utah, with what I believe they get Oregon at home. They've already lost to Washington. They had the close game against Wazoo, but they get USC in Salt Lake City. That's not going to be great for the Trojans. The Salt Lake City is not a place that USC particularly likes to play well. And they host Oregon, and their road stuff it's at UCLA, at ASU, at Colorado, and they close out the season with Holy War.
All right.
But I'm confident in this Utah team.
All right. And finally in the Pac-12, UCLA 37, Cal 7. It's UCLA's first road win since September 17th in 2016. Their first road conference win since November 2015 on the road at Utah. They forced 5 turnovers from Cal. Cal's been very turnover prone this year. They've had 19 in 5 games, but 5 in this game. UCLA seems to be figuring things out a little bit now. If you look at the split on how many times they ran versus passed, 55 rushes versus only 15 throwing attempts. I feel like this is going to a place now where we're starting to see more of a Chip Kelly offense.
Yeah, and Cal's not particularly good. I know their defense had a nice start to the year, and they still do have good pieces on that side of the ball, but the story here is UCLA breaking through. Yeah. I don't want to take too much away from UCLA because Dorian Thompson-Robinson has quietly ascended to a pretty fun level, and you can see the potential if he is surrounded. His offensive line is coming together nicely if he's surrounded with probably better level receivers than he has right now, pass catchers. The other story is Josh Kelly.
Yeah.
UCLA these past couple of years could not run at all, the last couple of years of the Jim Mora era, and quietly have had a couple of good running backs in what it was Paul Perkins before that, Jonathan Franklin forever, and Josh Kelly, the UC Davis. I don't know if you're familiar with the Aggies, the proud Aggies of UC Davis, but Josh Kelly has transferred in from there, and these past couple weeks against not insignificant opponents in Washington and Cal has become quite the name. So good for him. And if you're in Davis, California, get the garlic fries at Pluto's.
Josh Kelly, 62 carries, 406 yards. That's an average of 6.5 yards per carry and 4 touchdowns over his last 3 games.
You can build around that, Ty. You can.
For sure. All right, let's close it out and talk about the Big 12. Another non-marquee matchup for the Horns and another close win for Texas. 23-17 was your final. This one came down to the final play. Charlie Brewer threw it out of bounds, but another case where you called it. Not a marquee matchup. Texas doesn't cover the point spread. They win, and clearly they've moved up now well into the top 10. They are positioned nicely. But of note is the fact that Sam Ehlinger hurt his throwing shoulder early. He did not return. We saw Shane Buechele come in and get the job done, but certainly the severity of that injury, and I haven't seen anything throughout the course of today, that injury has a lot to say about where Texas's season goes and where the Big 12 goes.
Well, you yourself are an elite athlete who has dealt with shoulder issues,
This is very,
right?
of course, for sure.
It's an AC joint sprain for Sam Ehlinger, which I think it's grade 1. I don't know how good or bad that is. They say they have a bye week, right?
Yes.
And they said they expect him to be in a pretty good position to potentially play. It was, very vague language. With regards to the Baylor game itself, Baylor made plays. There was a weird non-interception that seemed like an interception, and Texas did just enough to pull this game out. But yes, the ceiling becomes demonstrably lower without Sam Ehlinger because this defense can't do it alone. I know they're going to get up for those big games, but I'm worried about this Texas team without Ehlinger.
All right.
If that should come to pass.
Let's go over to Texas Tech 17, TCU 14. This one on Thursday night. Did I say it out loud, or was I just thinking it in my head that we were thinking shootout and this was going to end up being like 17-14?
Yeah, if you nailed it, you nailed it. And listen, I give you all thy credit. Texas Tech that has a full-on occasional defense. I don't know how we can qualify this, but since that Oklahoma State game, they keep Oklahoma State to 17. They hold down TCU to 14. They basically shut out West Virginia in the second half. I don't want to speak out of turn here, Ty. Texas Tech's defense might be approaching respectable.
Whoa. I would say they're texting with the defense. They don't quite have it yet, but they're on again, off again, at least flirting with having
They're charming.
One.
They're charming with the text.
A lot of emojis going back and forth there.
But good GIF usage, and yes, friends, it's GIF.
Yeah.
They're savvy with the texting.
Too many mistakes for TCU in this game. Gary Patterson was pretty vocal about that after the game. You can't turn it over the way they did. And now next week, TCU is at home against Oklahoma. So it's not going to get any easier for them. We're coming to a point again where TCU has let me down for the umpteenth consecutive year. Said it at the top of the season that I was back on with TCU. Now it seems like maybe we're back off again.
Baby, I've changed. Baby, please, I've changed. Come on, I got my own place. Baby, please, shh, I'm a new me. Yeah, TCU is it's just a down year for the Frogs. That's all it is. And too many mistakes and not being able to move the ball consistently on the ground. Defensively, they look like TCU. And by the way, just speaking of weird, awkward moments on this show, Jet Duffy kind of pulled in this game, and then McLean Carter gets hurt, and Cliff has to do the whole, so I guess if you're still willing, we need you. And comes through. Jet Duffy makes plays, has that long run, and Texas Tech, they're quietly 4-2 in a Big 12 that is looking like there are two very, we've talked about this conference as a conference with a very healthy middle class, but it appears that the haves and have-nots are sort of separating themselves. And Texas Tech is on the good side.
There are a lot of quiet teams like Tech, like Duke, like Virginia. Mm-hmm. We could have a whole silent but deadly episode if we wanted.
Yes. It would be quite appropriate.
At some point this season. And then finally, K-State 31, Oklahoma State 12. I think K-State is quickly coming to a point where they're just like, F it, we're going to run it every play. What's even the point here? Alex Barnes has had 2 games.
He might still be running.
2 games that are incredible. 181 yards and 4 touchdowns on the ground in this game. Also had 51 yards receiving. If you add that in with what he did last week, 504 total yards, 7 total touchdowns for Alex Barnes and K-State. Again, why do anything else when you could just give it to him?
Do you think Bill Snyder and Joe Moorhead had a call after the game, or maybe when they shook hands at the middle of the field, we're just like, hey, should we just run? What are we doing?
Like, what if we just ran? Yeah, I was thinking.
Let's just keep running.
This reminds me a lot of old school UConn.
Yeah, Jordan Todman,
Randy Edsall, part 1, where they just ran it 50 times a game with Jordan Todman,
and smart enough to say, you know what? Maybe we shouldn't throw it a lot with Dan Orlovsky. Maybe we shouldn't. Maybe let's see what happens. You know what? F it. Let's go to the Fiesta Bowl. And also, Oklahoma State. What happened?
I have no idea.
What are you? So yes, the Texas Tech game, I was willing to believe that was an anomaly, maybe a letdown after that really impressive win over Boise State. They kind of comfortably, kind of weirdly beat Kansas on the road. They lose a shootout to an Iowa State team. And you're like, okay, well, Iowa State's, they've been improving pretty steadily these past couple of years. Scoring 12 against Kansas State? This Kansas State team?
I don't get it.
Oklahoma State, you're not on the right side of the haves and have-nots right now.
All right. Well, there you go. Any other tidbits here, Dan, that we need to tell the fine people about?
I got lots of bits, Ty. You know me. Yeah. I got lots of bits. First of all, on the ESPN Plus show I do every week with our pal Jeff Schwartz, my mystery pick was Princeton minus 40.5 over Brown. I nailed Colgate last week. This week I went Princeton. They don't cover. They only win by 38.
Oh, wow.
South Florida. I mean, obviously, I'm going to lead with Princeton. Everybody knows.
Sure.
South Florida needs every second of the game to beat Tulsa. It was something cattle. It was the comeback cattle.
Yeah, the comeback cattle.
That.
Yeah.
The cardiac cattle.
Yeah.
So yeah, they are an LRO team. They're going to lose, and they're going to lose in spectacular fashion sooner or later. That's fine. They're still pretty good. I'm trying to think what else stood out to me. Utah State and App State, maybe the two best group of 5 teams right now. Is that crazy to say?
No, probably.
I think Jordan Love is pretty incredible to watch. App State proved itself to be for real with that Penn State game, and then subsequently murdering everybody else.
Right. Yep.
San Diego State, if you want to talk about quiet, they're 5-1. They have the bad loss.
And you disrespected them.
I did.
Yeah.
I most certainly did. You have them. I owe you a breakfast burrito because of it. After they take down Arizona State. Buffalo, a very quiet 6-1 with a pretty comfortable win over Akron. And, I'm not going to repeat your nickname for their star receiver, but just know he exists. UAB, another quiet 5-1. They murder Rice and put up some huge numbers through the air. North Texas, that solid verbal bump. The Mean Green, 6-1 right now, led by their defense, which I can't imagine was a popular way of looking at Seth Luttrell and this team, but they comfortably beat Southern Miss. Western Michigan gets to 5-2. Bowling Green fires their head coach.
Yeah, I saw that.
Interim Carl Pelini. Did not expect to say those 3 words together in 2018. But here we are. Navy appears to be down this year. We'll see if they can come back the second half of the season, but they lose to Temple. And Jeff Collins hasn't lost in conference, and I think is slowly building Temple into something. I mean, I don't know what it is, Ty. Temple, all of the sudden, a string of promising coaches. It's very strange to say, but
Temple should do some contract work for other schools looking for coaches.
Yes, they are evaluating well. Yeah. And Houston gets to 5-1, another impressive day for the Cougars. And you mentioned Virginia Tech. BYU makes a quarterback change. Tanner Mangum somehow is not still the quarterback. They turned to a freshman, Zach Wilson, who at 19, I believe, is the youngest quarterback ever to start a game for BYU.
Wow. Crazy.
Yeah, that's a thing. And very quietly, if we're just going to speak about silent but deadly, Fresno has that loss to Minnesota, that crazy last-second loss. But Marcus McMarion, the Oregon State transfer quarterback, has been pretty electric for them. They demolished Wyoming. Fresno State probably has one of the best 12 to 14 defenses in the country. So pretty cool on the San Joaquin Valley's finest and Jeff Tedford's Fresno State.
Dan, you got any dudes?
So, Ty, I always have dudes.
All right, who we got here in week 7?
Breathlessly. USC's entire damn defense. Alex Barnes, CJ Verdell, who was enormous for Oregon in their upset. Purdy like a Brock star, Brock Purdy, Felton Davis, Xavier Ubosi. I mentioned UAB. He had damn near 200 yards through the air, receiving, Tyler Huntley, we mentioned, Jordan Love for Utah State, another, I think, had 5 touchdown passes. Michigan's entire offensive line, Iowa's tight ends, TJ Hawkinson and Noah Fant, the most Iowa-sounding tight ends in the world. Carter Coughlin, who was everywhere from Minnesota on their defensive line. Assumption College, and I guess LSU College's Cole Tracy made a ton of field goals for LSU. And you, Ty, you're a dude this week for putting up with this ridiculous equipment issue we're having.
Well, it's been a long, tiring day and weekend, but nonetheless,
this
lot
is
of
like
fun.
our 6th, 7th recording attempt?
At least. We started at 9:30 this morning, and it wasn't until about high noon that we decided to pack it in to take 9 hours, whatever.
Yeah.
And give ourselves a chance to figure this out. And then we started back up. It didn't work. Switch mics mid-episode. We're going to get a podcast out there. We'll probably, hopefully.
If you're listening to it, congratulations. We did it.
We did it. Hopefully we'll get things figured out in time for Wednesday. I think we will. But a monumental showing of stamina here by both you and I, Dan.
I got a belly full of luxurious Indian food and still nothing but love for week 7.
Daniel, on that note, a very fun week. We will be back on Wednesday to break down all of week 8. The slate isn't as robust as we saw in week 7, but if the last couple weeks have been any indication, it'll be just as crazy as ever. So keep it right here, solidverbal.com. You can also find us on social media, on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. We've also got a subreddit out there at reddit.com/r/solidverbal. By Verballers, for Verballers. And as always, keep thinking up those witty comments because the Reverb line, which we open up every weekend, is like the coolest thing ever. I love that thing so much. Thank you so much for calling in. Thank you to our boy Taylor, who helps us out each and every week with the reverbs. Thank you to our friend Nick, who helps us with all things Pac-12 and some of these point spreads. We've had a lot of help this year, and it's a lot of fun. A lot of fun to be part of this. For that guy over there, my good friend Dan Rubenstein, for myself, Ty Hildebrand, thank you again so much for tuning in, for bearing with us. We'll be back on Wednesday. In the meantime, stay solid.
Peace.